on your own a bit. Do you think someone is capable of changing their bad behavior in 2 months? It very much depends on what kind of bad behavior you're describing. There's some kind of bad behavior that is very ingrained, and there's other types of this bad behavior that comes to mind that really just takes considering alternate viewpoints and figuring out some new skill sets, and then you can hit the rubber to the road. So it really depends. It is very, very case by case, and example there. Thanks for the likes, y'all. Love yourself, not someone else. Got to. You cannot love anyone else if you don't love yourself. It's really not possible. We can love how they love us, but we can really not love in the sense of the word as it's really intended. I feel like I'm failing at everything, even though I'm not. What can I do about this? So if you know that you're not failing, and it's like an intrusive thought that you're having, like I'm screwing up, I'm failing. First, I want you to know that that's a common automatic negative thought. It's called in cognitive behavioral therapy. So first, and people that have like imposter syndrome, if you think about it like that, that's basically like a lot of perfectionism, or it sounds like that's what you're describing is perfectionism. You feel like you're failing at everything, even though you're not. So I would want to consider where you learned how to be perfect, why you thought that it needed to be like that, and how you can go about unlearning that from whatever unhealed people tried to teach you that. And then the same person asks, why do I keep attracting emotionally unavailable men? It's connected to how you're a perfectionist. So you attract emotionally unavailable men because you're a perfectionist. You learn to be a perfectionist. You don't want to get vulnerable. That's part of your perfectionism. So you're attracted to emotionally unavailable men because they won't demand that you scratch the line like that. So it's mutual. Always takes two to tango. And what you're talking about, those two issues are come from the same source. After 33 years of marriage, I'm ready to walk out. I'm sick of lying and cheating. That is a long time to be messing with lying and cheating for 33 years. I'm glad you are getting a move on. Why do I attract men that need to be fixed? There's a lot of different variations of that. A lot of different variations why you might attract people that need to be fixed, or why you are attracted to people who are not very high functioning is also what that says. I think a part of you probably really wants to be in a control, and a part of you doesn't want to have to get super vulnerable either. And if you're with people who are lower functioning, who need to be fixed, then there are some secondary gains for the person in the enabling position in there. Oh, thanks for the love. Where it is a miserable position. You feel like Sisyphus, like pushing the world up a mountain every day, and there are lots of obvious reasons to be very upset with what this other person is doing and why it's holding us back so much. However, at the end of the day, we're still participating in what's happening here. Why do men not show vulnerability? It is systematically taught to us, sometimes even beaten into us, and then rehearsed through a lot of social policing, that vulnerability means weakness, and any kind of emotional flooding means you're stupid. And it's quite unfortunate. It's left over from what used to be called hunting and warring, and is now providing and protecting, and is still left over from largely from the isolated farming communities that our social and cultural underpinnings still come from. And it really gets a lot of men in trouble when it comes into integrating their full humanity and having meaningful relationships with women and with themselves, and not being black holes of people. I think a lot of men are really set up and taught to be really unhappy, shitty folks, and treat folks really poorly. And a lot of times they don't get that there are other ways of doing things, which is quite like it. If I wasn't a therapist, and also if I wasn't a dude doing this and specializing in that stuff, it would kind of blow my mind sometimes. But to this day, every now and again, sometimes when I get in that space with a fellow, I'm like, like, how are you protecting them if you're not protecting their emotional safety? And they look at me and they go, oh my God, you're right. I'm like, yeah. No, it never blows my mind. Therapy has me feeling bad, feeling about my family, but they love me, I know this. Oh, this is a very common issue that you're talking about. The feelings are real. Anytime we start questioning the belief systems that underpin where we came from, an automatic experience of shame comes in. Right? And shame is a very primal affect in the human range of emotions. And it's the freeze response to fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And it makes you just stop in your tracks and refuse to, it's basically what happens before shunning. So what you're talking about right now, what you're dealing with in therapy, if you'd have talked about this stuff openly growing up, you would have been shunned. You would have been punished, whether overtly, covertly, however it would have happened. And that shame response is kicking in as a leftover survival mechanism of how you've kept yourself safe, is by not questioning these things. So what you're talking about there is extraordinarily common when anyone gets to start going through some existential crises. You see it called in the spiritual community the dark night of the soul. It's the same thing. It's when you've kind of gone as far as your belief systems will take you, and you have to chop up and re-question everything. And while you're doing that, or a lot of things at least, and while you're doing that, sometimes it's going to feel like you are not being loyal to your family because you're not being loyal to those lessons, sometimes even very unconscious, that we are challenging. And it's a natural feeling. It's not real. It's real. It's not reality. This is how I would try to convey it to you. So I did avoidance or aggression. I avoid and ignored the abuse since my CPTSD or similar things. Yep, that is a very common response. The avoidance response to abuse. I never told my children about his behavior. I never wanted to destroy your soul. How can I make peace? Make peace with them? I hope you're not trying to make peace with him. You talk about someone who sounds kind of scary, destroying your soul type talk. So what you can do with your children is you need to strike a balance. It's going to be a tricky one. First, you need to not badmouth him as much as you can, which is very difficult because they have a degree of loyalty to him, even though he sounds like a scary cat, because that's one of their parents. And if you speak about him in ways that there's not common knowledge, or if it's made to come off as kind of showing a negative light, then they're going to trust you less and they're going to want to go to you less. And I know that sucks because you know all this stuff and you want to be able to help them see it. They're going to see it in their due time. What you need to do now is manage your relationship with them. And then if anything happens in real time, and with all of y'all together that they see, go back to the power and control wheel. Go back to helping them identify exactly what he is doing using this tool. You can find this at the link in our bio. There is a few different copies of this tool and different ways to cut it up and look at it. And you can look at what he is doing if you have examples in real time. And it's not even, it's not bad mouthing. It's just, this is what's happening. I want you to understand the language of what this is. And keeping it as neutral as possible. I was raised with having to write it because massive attacks. How do I call myself from that? Having to write it. I don't know, are you talking about writing your feelings? I'm not sure what you're talking about. Set boundaries and say no. Yes, people pleaser, even at the detriment of my own time and energy. Yeah, the people-pleasing cognitive and emotional scripts. So like cognitive, like self-talk that goes into you have to keep them happy. If they're upset with you, you're screwed. You're worth less than other people. So if they're unhappy, You always have to placate them because you're lucky to have them in your life. Like these kind of things that tend to come up for us, as well as all the shame and the questioning of ourselves. And then when especially if people are up to no good and they see that we're on our heels and they start, poking at us and using some of the gaslighting and emotional abuse tactics, then all the hypervigilance goes up, and then we really get disoriented, and we're easy to be taken advantage of in that position. If we are messing with pleasing other people, then we're never going to be able to please ourselves. Why did you change your username? I changed it so a couple different reasons. One is got a book coming out pretty soon, and wanted to just kind of be using the name that is my name, my author, authoring the book, as well as I had a lot of people having strong reactions, especially on this platform, to the balanced man plan. It felt very man-centric to a lot of folks. A lot of folks were having trouble seeing what all was going on, and I knew what it was, but it doesn't matter if too many other people are having a hard time seeing what it is, and I can figure out a way to be flexible with it or help it evolve to more accurately capture what it is we're doing here. That is the whole point. It's not for me to be doggedly steadfast to a concept that is hard to pick up for folks. So I'm already seeing like 50 messages in the Q&A section down there. Just make sure you type it up in the comment section where I'm actually going to see it. If it's down in the QAs, I'm not going to see it. I feel bad about someone just punching in your questions and being really passionate about it. And if you don't feel comfortable writing them in a more public setting like this for whatever reason, totally get it. Like whatever's clever, just send them to me privately into my DMs, and I'll ask you if it's cool to answer them. How can I manage my rejection sensitivity? Go practice. You need to go practice. You need to have ways of grounding yourself in what you're confident in as well. It's not by avoiding it. The more that you avoid going to situations where you can be rejected, if that is what you're sensitive to, the more your anxiety goes, like you're avoiding it, and then it makes the anxiety go away. So that means that thing really is scary. So we're going to be even more anxious about that next time. And then it makes you even more sensitive to it. So you need to go practice, need to go get out of your comfort zone. I'm sorry, their soul, always protect them to be to the education and being sure that they were stable first. So I did avoidance or aggression. I avoid and ignored the abuse since my CPTSD was having. Okay, so it sounds like you grew up in an abusive household and you grew up journaling and writing, and I feel like that has something to do with how you get stuck in avoidance or aggression. I mean, it might not, I don't know, but what you're talking about is being stuck in either avoidance mode, like freeze or flight, or fight. They're all sympathetic nervous system states. So what you need to work on doing is identifying yourself having those triggering experiences, recognizing what it is for you, and learning to regulate your central nervous system so that you don't, in bringing on the parasympathetic nervous system. So you're stuck in a sympathetic state. This is the fight, flies, freeze, fawn. Your IQ is dropped 30 points. You're not able to use executive critical functioning to the best of your capacity. It's, you're in a pretty one down position. So the more that you can, if you need to take a step out, go ahead and take a step out, and then learn how to regulate your central nervous system. The more that you can turn on that parasympathetic state, get the blood back into your brain, back into your lungs, and figure out what the heck it is that you want to do about these situations. And if it's in the past, you can start healing from wherever those triggers take you, moment to moment, and walking yourself back and learning to reprogram your neurocircuitry through it. Just if it fires together, it wires together, right? So if every time that you're running into triggers, you're walking yourself back, figuring out where it's coming from, correcting the intrusive thoughts, and practicing engaging differently, it's going to start wiring differently. It's a process called Hebbian learning. What fires together wires together. is through brain plasticity. Our brain is always pruning old circuits that no longer are used and making room for new ones. I never told. I was raised with having to write. Okay, yeah, set boundaries and say no. Thank you. You're welcome. Hi from Norway. What's going on? I got a lot of followers from Norway. I think that's really cool. I don't know what it is. I think it's pretty dope. How can I let go of the fear of being hurt? You need to grieve however you were hurt. You don't fear love, you fear old pain. And I'm sure whatever you fear, it's for good reason. If you're still scared of it, I'm sure it was awful. But that is what you need to be able to make peace with. And then once you trust yourself to fly if branches break, then you can go hang out with other branches on other birds and do your thing. But you should not fear love. Love will not hurt you. How do you know if you need to take time away from work? Well, it really depends on what you do and how that plays into the bottom line of your basic needs as well. I think there are a lot of moving parts with that, especially in a kind of a capitalist economy. I don't want to give a really general answer to that. Especially if you're someone, like the basic needs, I don't want to encourage you to like, damn the man and walk away. But there are a couple of different phases of kind of on the way to totally running out of F's at work. So first is just kind of like regular work stress. Everyone's going to run into that. Then eventually you're going to get into compassion fatigue, which is like having a hard time caring about what's going on. Like you can get there, but you're really like, this is hard, really hard to keep faking it, and I'm not sure if I'm ever going to make it. I'm just out here faking it. And then if you stay there for long enough with nothing changing, then you get to burnout. And this is like totally running out of F's. This is, like the dude who shows up to work in Fight Club and is like, yeah, I've been fighting, and like punches his boss in the nose and like has, the crazy situations play out, which that's a movie and that's probably pretty intense. I'm not saying that you're going to necessarily do that, but you just need to pay attention to where you are in that continuity of experience. And especially if what you're doing is like in healthcare, like if you're another therapist or if you're a doctor, if you're something like, you cannot let yourself get to burnout. It's really iffy letting yourself get to compassion fatigue. Like you got to keep your tools tuned, or you're going to be like that therapist who was on TikTok recently going like, the Holy Ghost saved me because someone's trauma dumping. It's like, oh my God, you're about to get so roasted, sister, so roasted. Oh, and like you can't do that. So it really, it depends. Can you have trauma and not really know or remember what it is? Yes, especially if it's not physical or sexual. If it doesn't have to do with physical touch, it can be really confusing. And there are all types of different emotional neglect and parentification that folks get exposed to that really complicate attachment past funky attachment style. Until you get like attachment trauma, until you start getting adverse childhood experiences. And then however those are layered into the attachment issues and whatever narratives the family has going on, they can play into pretty dynamically playing out complex PTSD responses. That I think is the general populace, even on a more forward-thinking app like TikTok, is just starting to understand. You still see a lot of like pejorative ways of describing things, rather than hurt people hurting people. What's a good first step to setting boundaries and saying no? I think a lot of times people really fail at doing this because they're trying to go too big too quickly. Just like most things in life, when we like have really grand plans for ourselves, and we just want to take a bite off the whole branch and just get on with it. But it's too much, too fast, and like that's cool that you see it. That's cool that you want to do it. Like, love it for you. Love that you see it. I want to help you do it too. I want to help you break it down into achievable chunks. Let's break it. So whatever, I think whoever you're talking about setting boundaries with, let's take even the focus off of them and let's start talking about like dealing with friends or dealing with just folks out and about when you're out at a bar, at a club, or when you start practicing speaking up for yourself and advocating for yourself in lower stakes settings, whatever that looks like, so that you can develop some repertoires that work for you. And then once you have some success in lower stakes settings, I mean, you're not going to develop you don't need a bunch of different ways of doing things, right? Like even people that are really good at doing things probably have 3 or 4 different variations of it, and they just figure out what category they're dealing with and rock with that. So go figure out your repertoire in a low stakes setting, and then start up in the ante, start getting into higher stakes and busting out your 3 or 4 dishes. You know, like all you need are tamales, tacos, fajitas, and some good chile relleno, and then you're good to go. It ain't gotta be too fancy. A lot of them will probably have the same components anyway. Just, you know, like all those dishes I just rattled off. Like there's maybe a difference in preparation, and you gotta have some fresh chiles for the chile relleno, like for sure. But all the other stuff, most of it's gonna be lying around already. Why do I feel attracted to someone else if I'm in a relationship? How do I stop that? So basically, generally people that are in relationships that are feeling attracted to other people have avoidant attachment issues. So that's kind of where I'll leave it with you. For whatever it is for you, you don't want it to go to the next level of vulnerability with your primary person, and you're taking on another emotional avenue to push some of your emotional intensity into. For some reasons for you, I don't know where they are, but you don't think you're okay enough to come as you are with your person, and you're still holding some cards, and then you're overcompensating for it over there. But there's nothing over there. There might be something in front of you, but most of what you've got is within you, and no matter where you go, there you are. So why don't you try to go ahead and deal with it with this first person, and go ahead and level with them about whatever it is you think that you could, and actually try to give this a chance. I was taught not to show my vulnerability, and then I combust with crying. I'm sorry to hear that. It sounds like you feel ashamed about your vulnerability. So then when you start getting emotional or like vulnerable with people, you feel like you're doing something wrong. And then like you said, combust with crying, you know, it's like Hunger Games, like girl on fire, but like with crying or like emotional intensity. Like you start getting sad or start talking, and then it's like you feel ashamed of yourself, and it goes. So what I want you to do is I want you to journal a lot by yourself first, and allow yourself to get very emotional when you're by yourself, and practice tuning into it and regulating it and figuring out what that was, and making peace with that before you go out in front of other people. Because if you go out in front of other people, when that is going to happen, whatever shame response goes on for you is going to be like times 10 in front of other people, because that's the social function, is shame cranks up around other folks. You're going to want to make sure you have as high a level of confidence as possible before you take that out into the world. So again, as y'all are having questions, I love your questions. I always have fun with y'all doing this, and it seems to always get a lot of feedback that is helpful and it felt engaging. And I don't know if y'all see, we have a high weekly rating actually ongoing here, but there are like 95 questions piled up down there. And again, I feel bad thinking about someone just, like really focus on typing away your well thought out questions. But again, I'm not going to get to them if they're in the Q&A. The only way I'm going to see them is if they're on the comments section. If you don't feel comfortable typing them in the comments section, please send them to my DMs, and I will ask permission to share them with you in a live stream. But again, I don't want you to think that I'm just neglecting you down there. I think there's probably been enough of that out there. I don't want to recreate any of that, thank you. My husband repeatedly gives me the silent treatment. I don't know how to handle it. Just ask him what's up. Like, what's up, Silent Sam? You gonna talk? Like, why are we not talking? Was it that? Why would you just not talk to me about that? What are you hoping that says to me, just not talking to me? Are you just trying to tell me that you have the power to not talk if you don't want to talk? What does that do? Has it been said yet? Like, just like let them know that the silent treatment doesn't work. And let them know that what you want. And if they're not willing to do that with you, then they're officially stonewalling, and that's starts to turn into some assholery and some power tripping stuff. That's not cool. And with that probably comes along a lot of this stuff. So again, make sure that you're checking out your power and control wheels and looking for those specific behaviors so you can make sense of what it is that you're seeing, and it doesn't have to be as disorienting. How do I know if I need to take time away? Oh, I'm burnt out as a social worker, and I hate my job. Sounds like now. If you hate your job as a social worker, you need to go find another job. That's one of those jobs where you gotta can't do it. I have worked with so many burnt out social workers who just harmed so many people. I try to laugh so I don't cry, but like I've just so many. Like, please, you're contacting so many people. Take care of yourself. How do you get someone to have El Capitan? I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. Can you tell me? Maybe I could help you. I don't know. But it says, how can you get someone to? So this is already tells me that you only have 49% of the influence. Not very much. But you let me know. Maybe I'll let you know. Do I tell my children about their fathers cheating and lying? How do I keep them out and just move on? No, don't tell your children about your husband's cheating. Don't do that. Just divorce them and have dual custody. And when he acts like a dick eventually, because he probably will openly, you can start digging into that with your kids. But if you out him for cheating to the kids, your kids are probably going to be pretty pissed off at you. It's just, they're going to have so much pissed offedness to go around, and you're going to be an easy target, and it's probably not at a developmentally appropriate level for them. That is beyond their developmental capacity. That is too much for them. It sounds like you need to go to therapy, or you need to think about how you can leave that relationship. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am. Advice on being ghosted by someone you are in a relationship with. Respect the dead. Don't contact them again. They did you a favor. Like, if you're ghosted by somebody, it doesn't matter how close you've been to them. If you're ghosted by them, they just told you that whatever level of emotional intensity that y'all came to before is as deep as they go. That's it. El fine. The end. No mas. So if they'd have led you on any more beyond that, you would have been wasting even more time. You dodged a bullet. It probably feels like you took some other bullets involved, because being ghosted, like a sudden loss like that, hurts. And a lot of times we do a lot of taking it personally. We want to take on ownership for this stuff. A lot of times people that feel comfortable ghosting like that tend to be up to some more extensive or systematic assholery before that. So a lot of times they tend to partner with folks who tend to overfunction for them or allow that kind of assholery. So then a lot of times those of us who do that are more prone to taking ownership over things happening in the relationship when there actually accountability lies with our partner. So I'm sure it feels awful, but I am sure you are way more solid of a human being than them if they ghosted you. So in the end, you're win. How do you deal with shame? Processing it, figuring out where it's coming from and what it is that you have to feel ashamed of. It's very different moment to moment. It's a very natural human emotion and a full range of emotional intelligence in the human repertoire. It's there for some very important reasons. If it gets, there are some issues where it can get very stuck though. Like in the case of trauma, there tends to be a very predominant symptom of, it's called reflexive shame, where it's basically like a feedback loop of shame that we tend to sit on, where everything happens because we suck and because we suck, everything happens. And it just like keeps going. So it's really important to figure out what those themes of the trauma responses are so that we can start walking ourselves back from them, and or figuring out how else we tend to self-sabotage ourselves with shame and walking it back so that we can decipher when we have actually done something that is really not cool, that does risk us being kicked out of the tribe or does just offend our personal integrity to the core. That's what shame is for. But beyond that, it's really not helpful. So there are a lot of different ways that you might need to deal with shame, but it's just dependent situation to situation. Any recommendation on how to become emotionally available? Yeah, it sounds like you probably need to go to a counselor, do some therapy, and figure out how to unlearn whatever wounded people taught you. A lot of times, you've heard me talk a little bit about the intergenerational transmission of trauma as well. And there are some very kind of science-rich ways that happens through cortisol and epigenetics, but I'm not even going to get that highfalutin science-y biology-y with you. Let's just talk about when someone goes through trauma, you have to kind of unconsciously adopt belief systems and habits that help you survive. And if you don't work through that stuff, and then just continue on through life, holding those belief systems based on scarcity and all this stuff, and holding these habits based on self-soothing and over-competition and all this stuff to just like try to get ahead. And then we have kids, we teach them that stuff just through basic socialization and acculturation of how to human as a human being with other humans. Whether overtly or covertly, it's going to get passed on because their belief systems, their habits, kids always pick that stuff up. So what you need to do is figure out where you learned it, what that looked like. Oh, thank you, ma'am. There's this cool like heart thing came in. Can y'all see that when it happens? That was cool. Thank you. Whatever that. It looked like a crystal ball that it would like look in, but it was a heart. I kind of like for a second my creative side like imagined like a little like crystal ball like that's like a 3D globe heart thing that kind of just blew my mind for a second, but. Anyway, ADHD moment. Welcome into the day of the life. Children, and that wasn't me being pejorative about ADHD, but I've been diagnosed like 4 or 5 times growing up, although I'm not sure if it's actually ADHD or if it's just another part of the complex trauma stuff. But I dissociate and imagine very creative or abstract ways of describing things or explaining things. It's a big part of what I use as a therapist. And as a kid, I've always done it. Just kind of hang out by myself and imagine these very elaborate fantasy lands. I don't know who else can identify with that. Children, I never wanted to hurt my children. I know we never want to. We never want to. We're all doing the best that we can with what we have with our children. And once we learn better, we got to do better, right? Thanks, my Angelu. Advice on being ghosted by someone in your relationship. Respect the dead. I ranted about that for a minute. How do you deal with DV by proxy and parental alienation? Lies, social media, bad-mouthing, stalking. So what you're talking about are these tactics of the power and control wheel. This is gaslighting. This is the coercion and manipulation that goes along with domestic violence. Sometimes there is physical or sexual domestic violence happening alongside of it, but it goes along with maintaining the control and coercion in the relationship. So what you do with it is, one, you learn these tactics, learn how to recognize them, learn how to see through them for what they are. So you can start protecting your own energy from them and just saying like, oh, that's what, you're doing this. I'm going to just stay back. And you learn how to stay as non-reactive as possible while you plan your exit. It sounds like they're not doing the work. And if they're not, domestic violence is a chronic behavioral health issue. It will keep going until it reaches some of the final stages, which ends in murder-suicide. Like, if you start pushing up against stuff, it can get quite dangerous quite quickly. So if they're not going to do the work, I want you to know that that's not something that's going to stop, and you need to start looking for an exit plan. Intimidation, bullying. I'm smelling what you're stepping in, sister. I feel you. I know exactly what you're talking about. Your daughter is suffering. They're using your kids too. I want you to go to the link in the bio. It will take you to our blog feed. We have a very extensive blog feed, but the first blog covers these power and control wheels very extensively. Go through each one of these steps, what they look like, what you need to be looking out for, and there are lots of other links with how you can go about protecting yourself in those spaces. How do you deal with really bad depression? It's been hitting hard lately and being too much. Have you told talking about really bad depression, have you told your physician? Are you exercising? Are you paying attention to your gut health and eating reasonable food that's not making your whole body inflamed? Because 70% of the serotonin is actually stored in your gut lining. That's the main chemical involved in depression and anxiety and targeted by SSRIs, the antidepressants. So you need to take all of the natural approaches possible. I would advise you take all the natural approaches possible before you go looking at taking some other psychotropic medication. But if you do need to take some psychotropic medication, that's what you need to do, like whatever's clever. But there's so many different things that you can be doing. Now again, maybe just want to go to the link in the bio. It won't be our first blog, because the first one there is about psychological abuse and domestic violence. But if you click on the header, that'll take you down to several categories to physical health. You'll see several about like sleep hygiene, about the gut-brain axis and nutrition, about living a purpose-driven life so you can maximize your internal motivation and get those flow states going and get all the happy chemicals going on naturally the way that we're intended to be doing. There's a ton of information on those blogs about just that. How do I deal with a abusive, self-centered coworker who has our manager wrapped around his panky? Just wrapped. Well, it sounds like a pretty influential person. So it might be hard just to say like, right? And with people like that, if you're in a really highly political setting, like a corporate workplace, it's really hard to, it can be very difficult to out them. They tend to be pretty dug in. Corporate likes those type of folks. They just, cause they function scarily well in those kind of dog-eat-dog types of worlds. What I think a lot of times people underestimate is how easy it is to manipulate manipulators. I'll say it. Because it is incredibly easy. All you have to do is stroke their ego a little bit and then point them in the direction that you want them to go. And like they'll go. So what I want you to do is consider how you can minimize whatever reactions that you're having to this person that you can't do anything about. And maybe we reconsider how we think about this person's character traits, and rather than trying to get their approval or fall into their good graces, just like butter them up and push them in whatever direction you want them to make rain and go influence the people, all the other people, like use them. They're trying to use everybody else, whatever. And then it keeps you out of their, they see you as someone that's buttering them up a lot, so they're probably not going to screw it with you. Oh, I'm glad the book suggestion was helpful. Need advice for a new empty nester? Yeah, y'all go on dates. Like, go do the things that y'all used to do, as much as you can, and know that it's gonna feel weird at first. Maybe get some go see a therapist, maybe a couples therapist. Let them know that you just are empty nesters, and you do this is what you want out of it. Or maybe get some books on the topic. But you need to start getting thoughts and ideas and desires and intentions floating around and mixing around. And you need to create that as the new norm for what this is going to be. Because y'all have the whole rest of your lives, and y'all just did a lot of hard work of launching these little birds out there, and like, y'all go have fun. Like, y'all go do you. And the fact that you're saying, like, and if it's just for a new empty nester, then it's time to get your groove back, whatever that looks like, and start living a life of passion again for you. If that's individually or in a relationship, whatever that's going to be. Just got on talking about anxiety. I'm sure we were. It could change pretty quick. Any recommended books to read on the subject? On what subject? Squirrels? I don't know. What subject? I fear waking up the next day. IPV survivor with complex trauma. How do I break the cycle of feeling victimized by others? You need to familiarize yourself with the power and control wheel. So first, I think it's very courageous and brave. You're recognizing that part of your reaction is like feeling victimized by people when they might not actually be doing that to you. And that's a very brave step to start taking in the healing journey. And that's when things really start to change, when we realize how much power we have over how we tell ourselves that people perceive us, and how safely we can keep ourselves now with what we know about the world. So what you need to do, again, is go to the link in the bio, go read about these power and control wheels, so that when you are feeling victimized, you can go back to the wheel and say, okay, what exactly happened? How did that play out? Did they do these things? If they didn't do these things, it's not gaslighting. And it's about you. It's about your reaction that you're having to it, and you can walk yourself back and continue healing from that. And if they are doing it, you can say, bump that. Like, I ain't getting down with that anymore. Been there, done that. Got the t-shirts with the blood on it. No mas. How do I know how to start self-healing and self-love? I have so much trauma built up, I can't afford therapy. Well, you need a mentor, whatever that's going to look like. So if you can't go get a therapist, then maybe you need to start going to some support groups or something. But you need a mentor, because if you have a lot of trauma stuff, something that gets blocked is our ability to love ourselves. It's really, the option gets taken off the table with trauma. In order to survive trauma, one of the unconscious beliefs that we have to internalize is that we're not worthy of love, and that the cosmos doesn't need us, and we're good for nothing. And if a tree falls in the forest, who's there to, it doesn't make a sound, who's there to hear it? Thanks for the rose. That's not about trees, although like a little bit probably, like they need each other, and the roots are connected through mycorrhizae and fungi, actually, in a very similar way to us neurobiologically. But you need to be with other people that can start seeing you for who you are and appreciating those pieces as you show up with them. And that doesn't happen on your own. It also doesn't happen without the help of someone who has a bit more experience than you, that can help you start walking back some of those pieces. And if it can't be in therapy, go see what other kind of community supports that you have available. Thank you, ma'am. How do I stop triggers when it comes to a man? I was in a serious relationship, passed away 4 years ago. I don't know what you're saying here. I keep getting fired over and over by bullies. They trigger me and I fall for it every time. That's frustrating. I'm sorry to hear that. That's a lot of bullies to run into one after another, though, as bosses. And the likelihood of bosses being bullies is higher too. Like, I don't want to just totally minimize your experience. Is everyone else getting fired at that frequency? Because if not, you need to start checking out how you're playing a role in those. And I think you already started talking about that a bit. You're saying they trigger me and I fall for it. You might need to start considering that they're not always triggering you. Sometimes you're getting triggered, and it's your responsibility to heal from those, especially in a professional setting. Office Space. That's such a good movie. Thank you. Your TikToks help me jump in addressing my childhood trauma. That's awesome. Good to hear. Good to hear. It cannot be, TikTok cannot be therapy, but we can share a lot of information and try to expand consciousness and provide psychoeducational information. And a lot of times that is systematically lacking in our healthcare, our mental health care and educational systems. So sometimes just getting a little information and getting some different little perspectives at a cadence can really break things free. But it's not a therapy. I keep losing my job over and over. People keep setting me up for failure. I think, you need to take a look at that common denominator. How do you get over your ex even though you know your soulmates? I don't know what that means. How do you get over your ex even though you know you're not soulmates? Okay. So first of all, no one else is your soulmate. Like you are your soulmate, and other people will reflect in you what you need to work on in order to integrate yourself and keep your soul more and more aligned. No other person is your other half. No other person is your soul tie. That's not how this works. That's literally how none of this works. So you need to start grieving from that, and figuring out who you are at this point in your life and what you want, whether it is being on your own for a while so that you can make sure that what you're looking for in a partner is gonna make your life better and align more with who you are as a human being and enrich it, rather than leaving you stuck feeling kind of desperate and attached, without being able to sit in your power. Oh, thanks. I think that was like a Kung Fu Panda, I think. Wow. I have so much trauma, I gaslit like crazy. I get gaslit like crazy, right? It's a lot of, if people that live in pervasive domestic violence, even if there's not physical stuff in it, it's just like an abusive relationship, the gaslighting, the emotional abuse, the manipulation, coercion, it is all over everything, that it can be very, very pervasive. How do I get past minimizing my trauma? Catch yourself doing it and correcting your self-talk. Catch yourself doing it and correct it. I'm going to do another post, I think this week, about ways that we gaslight ourselves. I saw a lot of responses to a recent video that I did. I was like, oh my God, these are the things I say to myself. And I was like, okay, we need to talk about this. We need to reclaim our power more here. So it's coming. It's coming. Love your shirt. Thanks. It is a cool shirt. This is what it says on the front. On the back, it says, do no harm, take no shit. It's a yin yang. You can check these out on our website as well. If you go to the link in the bio, there's at the top it says apparel. And 20% of all the proceeds always go to the suicide prevention hotline. On the back, I think it's super cool. It's a yin yang. And one side says do no harm, the other side says take no shit. If you hear me talking about the love of power and the power of love, so using the power of love, we can take no shit. You can be fierce using the power of love. Now, when it comes to the love of power, you really have to intentionally stay away from that at all costs. And by doing this, we can avoid doing harm. And by navigating this line, we can protect our power, not hurt other people, and empower everyone else around us to the fullest. How can I avoid future relationships with narcissists? Dad and ex were narcs. So it seemed to be running into abusers a lot. You need to work on your boundaries. You need to work on self-love. And you need to, that's where I would start. So go to our playlists around trauma bond, around self-love and healthy boundaries. Because really at the end of the day, especially with the boundaries part, if you have boundaries that are based on your own self-love and respect, people who are takers, people who are abusive, are not going to be able to be aligned with that, because you're going to be unapologetically in your source energy, in your abundance, and they won't be able to take, because you won't give that much, enough that will feed someone who has a lust for it like that, and they'll have to fall away. Rad shirt, thanks. Holy smokes, this train is hard to ride, right? This ain't what's that the lyric from Grateful Dead song? Casey Jones ain't watching his speed, man. This train is a rockin', I'll tell you. And it is an acquired taste. Learn to appreciate some of these spaces of pain and fear and uncertainty, and working through this trauma stuff with folks. It is wild. You are absolutely correct. How do you find out what your core values are so you can adapt and live a more value-based life? I love that question. So first, I want you to think about what you used to like to do when you were a kid, to have fun. I want to prime you with those memories, like prime your brain with those. Did you like physical? Was it like intellectual? Was it creative? Like the spaces where you just lost time and had fun as a kid, or the last time that you can remember doing that. Then I want you to Google core values, or Google value system, and you'll like find a list of like 100. And I want you to pick out all the ones that you are feel affiliated with, and then take all of those and create 5 categories with them. Then name each of those categories. You have your values. I know that was a really specific answer, but that's an exercise that it created as part of the self-guided coaching plan on our website around living a purpose-driven life and figuring out. So the core values, what we talk about, is being your personal integrity. It's the top of the triangle. So this is what guides using your passions and using your natural talents, resources, and abilities. So if we use everything that we have available to us by our values, and making sure that we're not leaving ourselves behind and really doing what's important for us and our loved ones at the end of the day, we can go to bed good tired. Then it's so much easier to stay in gear and keep grinding, and not get caught up with scarcity and short-term pleasures and this type of thing. Or get confused when someone's like, hey, do you want to do this? And it does not line up with who you are. You can go back to, okay, like, where's my due north? Like, what are my values? What's my integrity? Nah, it can't get down. Like, it does not align. And then those people that are, you were asked about these narcissists and narcissism, the people that are takers and abusers. If you are making sure that you're protecting your own integrity consistently, they're not going to want to roll with you, because you are not going to be easy to manipulate. I'm 46 and just learning about being an extreme people pleaser in every relationship I have. I hear you. It can be frustrating to see. When you start seeing it around everywhere, some of these kinds of things, it is so stressful. Like, so from a therapist who's been on the other side of the session a good bit, like any good therapist should have done a lot of their own therapy. When you realize that there's something that you do that's really fucking pervasive, that was unconscious before, when you finally realize it, it's almost like, it's like, when you're a kid and you're like sitting out in the grass, like playing with bugs or something. I'm a Georgia kid. Like, there's lots of bugs outside. We're playing with bugs, right? And you're like looking at a bug, and your eyes focus in on it. And then once your eyes focus in on it and gets the range right, suddenly you pick up on, you're like, oh shit, I'm sitting in an anthill. Like, they're everywhere. That's what this stuff tends to be like. So around people pleasing, when you realize that something that you do, it tends to be quite pervasive, and you start looking around everywhere else and going like, oh my God, it's everywhere. And it can be kind of intimidating. Oh, but you're not weird. And if you can keep all those other people happy and get this far, imagine how far you can get just being fair enough with them and keeping yourself happy. Like, you know, imagine that. No, I've just realized I've had 46 years of attachment, parental, and marital trauma. That's a lot. I spend every waking moment sad. You sound depressed. Please go talk to your medical provider. And every waking moment sad. That's a lot. What happens after you understand your trauma? You start breaking down the intrusive thoughts. You start regulating your central nervous system. You start developing your core values. You start living a purpose-driven life. You start doing the work that you need to do to transcend it, to move beyond it, to adapt as much as you can around it and grow above it. It's just like with grief, someone that dies that you love very much, you never miss them any less. You just grow more as a person around their absence. And it's the same with trauma. It's the same with post-traumatic growth. You're going to be fundamentally changed as a human being after that. You're not going to get back exactly who you were. And there's going to be work to slough off the yuck from whatever that was. But left over are going to be some nuggets, some diamonds in the rough that will help you either hyper-focus or help you look creatively at things or help you be more persistent than anyone else in the room because they have not gotten through shit like that. And but it takes work. Started with full haul. Keep me pretty much now trying to come out a little slower and strong. Yeah. Achievable pieces. Don't slow down. There was one time this supervisor who I really liked when I was first starting out, and I was really bright-eyed, bushy-tailed therapist. Like, go figure. Like, I'm still kind of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. When I was like, oh man, I'm gonna go like save the world today, and I just got out of school. And I remember I was there. I was like, okay, this person, and my supervisor sitting with me, and he was going along with what I was doing in session. It was whatever. But then afterwards, he's like, "So Logan, you know how fast you want to go with that person?" Like, yep. Like these are the reasons I like them. Blah, 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 blah. I was like, okay. I want you to take that pace. I want you to hold it in your hands. I was like, okay. I want you to cut it in half. I'm like, oh. Throw half behind you. Like, oh. Like sitting here holding this. I was like, okay, fine. So you see that pace? He goes, yeah. I mean, you cut it in half again. Like, really? Like, yeah, cut it in half. I was like, okay. Throw it behind you. Huh. See what you got left over? Like, yeah, that's your pace. Like, oh. But any process of change, you got to meet your psyche where it's at. You can't freak yourself out. So make sure it is achievable. If it's the right level of achievable with the right level of important, you'll be motivated enough for it. But if it's really achievable and you're still not doing it, it's probably actually not important enough. It's probably about pleasing someone else rather than pleasing yourself. And if it's really important to you and it's still not happening, it's probably because you're trying to take a bite off too much. Let's make the bite smaller. I just left my abusive husband 1 month ago and I cannot cry. Help. Okay. Don't judge yourself that you can't cry. Don't judge yourself that you can't cry. What would have happened if you were crying in front of him? How much would he have picked you apart? How much would he have continued going after you? How much would you have just made your situation worse? You're going to have to relearn how to do some of this stuff. And I'm sure all of the symptoms that you're having are there for good reason. They're all there to help protect you. Give yourself time. Give yourself space. Don't judge it. That's all I got to say about that. Absolutely not one genuine person in my entire world. I'm sorry. There really are not. It's kind of, we're not taught to be genuine these days. We're not taught how to do this. We're not. It's in very, very weird ways that have only gotten weirder since the concrete jungle has become so pervasive and compartmentalizes everything. And it's very tricky. But if you make sure that you unapologetically speak up about what is important to you moment to moment, then only the right people are going to stay around you. All right, I'm going to answer one more question, and then I am going to continue rocking and rolling with the rest of my evening as a daddy and husband and getting ready for the rest of the week. Let me see here. I haven't seen... There's DV going around. Okay. Dude, you're better than... my therapist. I'm sure your therapist is great too. Your advice is so... you make my day better. Thank you. What if children ask about the cheating like they know already? If they know already, tell them. But don't tell them from you. If they know already, you can confirm it. I mean, just like nod. If they'd be like, did this happen? I used to just like nod and cry. You don't cover up for him. I saw my ex with someone else today. I know it would happen, but it still has its weight. It does. It's okay. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to see someone that you used to be with and still have feelings for them when there was someone. All of those things are okay. It's okay to have feelings. I wasted 5 years and got cheated on multiple times. I was with an abuser and got dumped like trash. That sounds awful. You're due for a super nice person. How do you deal with telling your kids about divorce? Really straight up. Be as straight up with them as possible. Okay, for real, last question. How do we use source finding the source of thought, feeling? Ooh, this is a good one. In a motivational way. Okay, so you need to use what I call them I feel statements, and you need to use them in your journaling and building your thoughts and feelings together and practicing combining them to create meaning. So an I feel statement is basically like I feel blank feeling because, or when blank context, it's like I feel sad when I saw that my dog was sick, when blank, because interpersonal meaning, because I love her very much and I thought about losing her and I felt very sad, right? And then last would be I need blank, like I need to take her to the vet. I need whatever. So what you need to start doing is, I want you to start journaling if you're not doing it already. And when you come up on something that you're really bothered by that you're journaling about, that you're just like scratching it, doing the really intense journaling. It should happen every now and again if you're journaling for real and you're not just like logging some shit and telling your therapist that you're journaling and being like, oh, I'm doing it. That's not journaling. So if you're actually doing it, and sit down and force yourself to put together some I feel statements. And collect those I feel, feeling, when context, because personal meaning, I need blank, and practice getting snapshots of these in one place. When, especially when your central nervous system is jacked up in that elevated state, when you're really intense about something. And over time, what fires together wires together. Again, it's called Hebbian learning. So we have brain plasticity far into adulthood. They used to think it slowed down dramatically after adolescence. It doesn't. It continues going until cognitive decline. Human beings are neurologically extraordinarily resilient creatures. And Hebbian learning, again, is what fires together, wires together. So if neurons are not firing together over a period of time, they get pruned. Think about like if you don't not active on a social media account for 6 months or something, it might get like clicked off by by that social media conglomerate. Same as in your brain. It's like, we're not using this, get it out of here. And then whatever is firing together has new circuits primed into it. So if you're practicing doing this, if you're practicing thinking about your thoughts and feelings and how they integrate into what you need, how to convey them to other people, and doing this diligently, you are going to learn how to do it. There's nothing else that can happen. So again, I really appreciate all of the engagement that we continue to have on these live streams as well as on the page. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, sharing, allowing me to be a part of the journey with you and empowering your loved ones. I've got a book coming out around Christmas, New Year's that I'm really excited about, called How to Human Up in Modern Society, Heal Yourself and Save the World. This is all about doing what we can, where we can, when we can.